What was your first experience of being in a cooperative?
My first experience of being in a cooperative was when I set up a book selling business with a group of friends in my early 20s. We were all about the same age and we were passionate about books and getting books to demographics that didn't usually have access to literature. The bookshop we set up was one that sold literature for people of colour, African Caribbean, Chinese, Indian people who did not at that time see themselves represented in literature. This was the early 80s and it was very difficult to find books which showed people of colour. So that was my first experience. I fell into it by accident actually. It was not my intention. I was actually meant to be going to university to do a social work MA, which fell through. And the week after it fell through, some friends of mine came and said, would you like to help us set up a cooperative business, a book selling business? And I said, I know what a book selling business is, but what's a cooperative? And they told me, and it was like things aligned, it fell into place because I'd been looking for cooperatives since I was 19, but I didn't know. I'd been looking for those values. So I remember being aged 19 when I worked for the post office at that time before leaving to go to university. And I remember thinking that although I loved my job, I felt that there had to be another way to work, a way which was more inclusive, which gave greater equality and equity and ownership and control, where at the end of the day I felt that I'd made a difference. And I was looking for that. I felt that that option ought to be out there, but it was never one that was presented at school, college, university, or anywhere else. And so that day when my friend said, will you join us in this enterprise? It actually changed my life. That's where my life pivoted, because I realised that that was everything I'd been looking for and that it actually had a name, and it was called cooperatives.
It's really interesting to see you talking about looking for something and you weren't sure what it was, and then finding this situation. It's interesting that cooperatives, they come in various formats and they can be fully structured organisations, and sometimes you find yourself in a group working cooperatively, which it sounds like you found yourself in that situation working with friends and then discovering what it was. So it sort of kindles something that was already there, and it's opened this avenue for you as well. So do you think that was the moment for you when you discovered, okay, cooperatives are a passion and I think I want to explore further, and is that something that then developed over time and refined your thoughts of it over time?
Yes, I think I think my passion for cooperatives has been refined over time and developed. When I first found out about cooperatives, it was an eye-opening experience. It was like, this exists. I think I was a little angry in some ways. I was like, why has nobody ever told me? How can you get to age 22, 23 and have never heard that this is a format that you can work in, that you can set up a business, but that business can be a cooperative? Why is it not taught at school? How come I came all the way through university without finding this? So at first I was a little bit cross that this had been kept away from me, and then very passionate about it, very interested in exploring the different ways of working, of finding out that there are worker cooperatives, producer and consumer cooperatives, housing cooperatives, finance and saving cooperatives, and also about finding out how so much of the world is actually underpinned by the cooperative movement. So the more I found out about it, the more I became passionate about it, because the more you know about cooperatives, the more you know that cooperatives actually play a very strong part in the economy and social aspects of so many countries across the world.
It's interesting, if you go back to the that first cooperative and those discussions you would have had with the people you're working with about how should we form ourselves into an organisation and the pros and cons of different groups. You can be a limited company, you can be cooperative, you could have been a charity, all these sorts of things. Can you recall how those discussions went? Was it ever in doubt you were ever going to be a cooperative, or was it very clear from the start this is the route we're going to take?
It was never in doubt that we were going to be a cooperative because that was integral to what we were doing. So we wanted to set up a bookshop, but we wanted to do it cooperatively. And it was a very flat organisation as well. We didn't have managers and workers. Everybody within the cooperative was equal. The cooperative principle about equality was one which really shone out to us, and we thought, this is great. We can run this business whilst all being on the same level and having equity and ownership and a democratic vote. The fact that cooperatives are built on the principle of one member, one vote, all of that appealed to us. It chimed with our ethics, our ethos. And so being a cooperative was never an issue. It was part of the business.
Those cooperative values really chimed a bell with you, and they pointed out something you already had in mind. So decided that for you.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. It crystallised what we felt anyway. And so it provided a framework and a format for our political and social views. It just fitted neatly with it.
How did you come to be a part of CASE later on?
Well, in setting up the cooperative, because as I explained, I got interested in cooperatives when a group of friends asked me to join, and it was a very opportune time, and I thought, yeah, let's see what this is all about. And they said, we know you love books, and we think you'll be a great member of our book-selling cooperative. And will you help us set up this business? And I said, well, I know lots about books. I know lots about literature. I've done an English language and literature degree. I know about that, but I know nothing about business. So how can I run a business? How will we do it? And they said, well, luckily, there's this place called a Cooperative Development Agency, and they'll help us. And I said, what do they do? And my friend said, they'll provide us advice, support, assistance, and help to learn about business and to set our business up, to choose a legal structure, to get registered, to get on the way. And they'll also help us once we're on the way. It doesn't stop once we're registered. They'll be there to help us to grow, develop, and consolidate the business. And that sounded almost too good to be true to me, but I thought, yep. And I said, how much do we pay? And they said, oh, it's a free service. So we went along for our first meeting. This was in Coventry, and it was Coventry, it's now called Coventry and Warwickshire CDA, Coventry CDA at that time, based at the Arches in Spon End, for anybody who may know Coventry. And we went along to the meeting, and it was exactly as my friend said. We found a bunch of dedicated and knowledgeable and committed people who treated us with respect. We were completely wet behind the ears. We were green. We knew nothing really about business. We were full of passion because we were young and we felt we could change the world, and we really wanted to change the world. And we felt that this selling literature was one aspect of changing the world, of opening up the world to people. And so we were full of passion, but we didn't know about business. And what we found was a group of people who could help us to understand terminology like business plans and balance sheet and profit and loss and marketing strategy and everything else that we needed to know. And they were tremendously helpful. And I remember at the time thinking, I'd love to do a job like this. If a job ever comes up like this that I'm able to apply for, I would love to do it. So I didn't do it immediately. We ran the bookshop for a little while, and then I worked for a women's training organisation, training women to return to the workforce or to set up their own cooperative businesses, so I transferred some of the learning that I got from Coventry CDA into that role. And then whilst I was there, a job came up at Leicester CDA, as it was then, now CASE, and I was actually encouraged by my development officers at Coventry CDA to apply for it. They told me about the job and they said, there's this job come up in Leicester and we think you'll be ideal for it. And so I applied for it and got the role. I came for 2 years en route to Sheffield because my passion in the 80s was to live in Sheffield. So I thought I'll come to Leicester CDA for 2 years and I'm still here.
How many years has it been?
I don't know if I even want to say on camera.
It's really interesting that your first experience was as a client, which I imagine has probably influenced your approach to working with clients ever since, and trying to put yourself in their shoes, so to speak. And it's great that you had that first positive experience. I was going to ask you, what was it about CASE that appealed to you? But it sounds like it's pretty much the perfect role for you. You've had this prior experience being cooperative, experience training, and it sort of fell into place. Did the business aspects of it appeal to you as well, working with clients and helping them realise their aspirations?
Yeah, I think that's working with clients and helping them to understand their aspirations and to achieve their aspirations was the main driver, I think, because we'd been helped in that way and I wanted to be able to repay. I remember when we were working with Coventry CDA and getting this free advice, support and assistance to set up our business, I thought it'd be great to be able to repay this someday, because even as it was happening, I could see that our lives were changing. We're getting more knowledgeable, more confident. We were beginning to understand how to run a business. We were turning from a group of inexperienced young people into fledgling business people. And I felt it took a tremendous skill set to be able to do that, and I was greatly in admiration of the people that we worked with. And I thought, wouldn't it be good to do a job like this, to be able to help people to realise their ambition, to set up in business, but not just setting up in business, because when you're setting up a cooperative, you're not just setting up to benefit yourself, you're setting up to benefit your community. In whatever you're doing in a cooperative, you're benefiting your community. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a job where you had that kind of impact? So it was that which attracted me to Leicester CDA. Actually, one of the things that attracted me to Leicester CDA was that it wasn't Coventry, which I perhaps shouldn't be saying on film, but I grew up in Coventry. And at the time when I was offered the job at Leicester CDA, I was also offered a very similar post at Coventry CDA, which paid about £2,000 a year more, which was a tremendous amount of money in those days. But I turned down the offer at Coventry because I wanted to go somewhere where I had a clean canvas, where I wasn't known and where I could be myself and grow and develop. So one of the things which appealed about Leicester was the fact to learn a new city, to learn to operate within different confines and to be myself within that setting. And also I like the idea of Leicester.
It's interesting you talk about your own personal growth and development, and also when you're talking about working with clients and helping them realise their ambitions and realise their plans, and also in a sense understand what they're trying to do. It comes a little bit back to what you were saying earlier, where we have young Dorothy starting out and discovering what a cooperative is and thinking, oh, I've been looking for this and I don't know, and I didn't know what it was. Are you seeing yourself a little bit at that moment and thinking, this is me when I was 20, realising, oh, this path is before me. And it's sort of come around a little bit, and you're now helping people who are in your position when you were younger as well. Is that quite a fulfilling experience?
It is a fulfilling experience to be able to help people in that way and to know that you're making a difference to their life, and in you making a difference to their life, they're making a difference to other people's lives. And I think that is, for me, an essential part of the job, knowing that we're achieving change as CASE in the work that we do. You know, working at CASE, we know that we make an impact. We know that we change lives, change communities, that we achieve change overall. And I think for me that's essential. And yeah, it's hard not to see myself and to take myself out of the equation, because often I'm remembering what it was like. And I think one of the things which informs my practice is to remember what it was like to not know. I think people find me easygoing and knowledgeable when I'm working with them to help them to set up their cooperatives. But I think one of the reasons is that always at the back of my mind I'm remembering what it was like to not know. And I'll tell you one story which is more than 30 years old, but which I've always kept at the back of my mind when working with clients. And this was very early on, setting up the book selling business that I've spoken about, when me and my friends, all of whom were reasonably well educated, you know, we had degrees and other qualifications, but we knew nothing really about business and didn't understand business terminology and language. And so we're sitting in a meeting with our business advisor, and he begins to talk about business plans. And I have no idea what a business plan is, but also I didn't want to look silly by saying I didn't know. And so I didn't say anything. I just nodded knowledgeably when he talked about a business plan. And he talked about business plans for the next 20 minutes. He must have used that word 15, 20 times. Business plan. And he ended the meeting by saying, and so I'll see you back here in 2 or 3 weeks' time with the first draft of your business plan. And so I nodded, looked at my colleagues, they were nodding. We left the room and I turned to my colleagues and I said, "What's a business plan?" They said, "Don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" "Don't know." "But you were nodding." But we were all nodding, Dorothy, because you were nodding so knowledgeably. You were like you knew. And I said, "I've got no idea what a business plan is." They didn't know what a business plan was either. We're in 1983. This story predates the internet by a long way. There was no way of us finding out what a business plan was, except by going back in and asking the advisor, "What do you mean by a business plan?" So we had to swallow our pride, go back into the building and say to him, "We don't actually know what you mean by a business plan. Can you tell us exactly what it is we're supposed to be doing?" He was mortified because he'd accepted or just expected that because we were educated young people, we would know what he was talking about. So he made a mark there to say, I need to change my practice. But it's something which I've always remembered and applied to my practice, to say to the people I work with, you only know, you know what you know, but if you don't know, you don't know. It's not a crime in not knowing. You're not foolish by not asking. Ask the questions, and it's actually more foolish not to ask than it is to ask. And so, yeah, I do remember what it was like not to know, and I do try and remember that when I'm working with people, and to not make people feel foolish, and to encourage them to ask questions, and to let them know that you build up your knowledge step by step.
So we've talked a bit about how cooperative values have an impact on businesses and organisations. We've sort of touched a little on how they have an impact on people's personal views and communities as a whole as well. So do you want to talk a little about how cooperative values have influenced your personal beliefs and political views and how that's developed over time?
Okay. So how have cooperative values influenced my beliefs? I think they're at the bedrock of my beliefs, really, because, as I said, the word cooperative was just a framework that encompassed what I felt and believed anyway and what I was looking for without even realising. And so I was probably always destined to work in cooperatives because I believe in that. I believe in common ownership. I believe in having a voice, a democratic vote, about equality, about equity, about participation, about community, about earning enough, not too much. You know, cooperatives are about earning a good living, but ploughing money back into the business so that it continues to meet its social aim. It's not about making tremendous amounts of money and getting overly rich. You know, in terms of my own personal beliefs, I've never been able to understand what a billionaire does with their money, for instance. What can you do with that much money? Who needs that much money? Why can't you spread that money more widely and make a better life for everybody instead of hoarding it in a bank? And so for me, those political and social views are encapsulated in cooperatives, and cooperatives were the only format for me, really, when I look back on it, because cooperatives wrap up what I was looking for anyway. And I think it fits not just with my social views, but with my economic world view, with my environmental view, because cooperatives are very much about the environment as well, about sustainability and about looking after communities, looking after the world that we live in. And I think cooperatives also relate to my religious beliefs. You know, I was brought up in Christianity and in adulthood chose to worship within the Baptist movement. And the reason why I like Baptist churches is because they too are built on a cooperative model. They are built on the basis of independence, so they do not belong to an overall entity in the way that, you know, churches do within the Church of England. All Baptist churches are individual entities in the way that all cooperatives are individual entities. Cooperatives are owned and controlled by the people who are members of them, who work in them, live in them, save in them, or whatever. And Baptist churches are owned and controlled by the people who are members of that church. And if you worship in a Baptist church, you have a vote in how things are agreed and decided. You have some element of control over what happens. And there is an analogy there within the Baptist movement and the cooperative movement, and they fit together. And they fit together very well in Leicester. One of the reasons you asked me why I was attracted to Leicester. I was attracted to Leicester because I thought it was an exciting city, and also it has a great history of dissent. If you look at most of the people who have been influential in Leicester, they've been dissenters, and I like dissenters. I like people who question, who argue, who challenge. And Leicester has also been a very dissenting city in terms of religion, has gone against kind of like organised religion and promoted religions like Unitarianism, Baptist Church, Methodism, etc. So yeah, for me, I find it very difficult to extract cooperatives from my life. It's a bit like the Shakespeare play where he's asked to extract a pound of flesh but without getting any blood vessels, etc. For me, cooperatives are interwoven with my life, my belief, my social, political, environmental values.
It's interesting to hear you talk about what's clearly your strong sense of social justice and social conscience, and your, I can call it your dissenting nature, which I think cooperatives have a strong ethos of running through them. If we think about co-ops in the present day, and over the last year in particular, we've had a rethink or a reimagining of what we view a community to be, and at this particular moment in time, post-COVID environment, post-Brexit environment, people are thinking about how to form businesses and how to structure organisations. Do you think there's a place for co-ops in the present day? And do you think there are particular opportunities presented at this moment in time for them?
Yes, I do think that there's a place for cooperatives in the present day. I think there's a place for cooperatives in all eras. It may change, but cooperatives are, I think, eternal, because cooperatives are about people working together. And I do believe that even though we sometimes display this to the contrary, I think that humans are cooperative beings. I think we've only reached where we are by cooperating, and I think that cooperation lies at the base of whatever we do. And so I think people always seek to cooperate. They may not know that they're setting up cooperatives, they may not apply that tag to it, but they'll look to change society through cooperation. And where we are at the moment in these post-Brexit, hopefully soon to be post-COVID times, people are challenging things. They're looking at a society which is very much changed and thinking, okay, how do we make this work? How do we make it work for everyone? And I think a lot of people who weren't previously looking at community-based initiatives are saying, we need to take control ourselves. We cannot trust others to do it for us, so we're needing to do it. And how can we do it? Oh, look, there's this structure called cooperatives. Maybe that will help. And so I think that there is a great scope for change as people look at healthcare, at elder care, at schooling, at how food is grown and distributed, about how money is used, at savings, how you apply finance. There are so many ways that people are thinking, well, there has to be a change, there must be a way to change this, and I think cooperatives provide that change.
So there's clearly a bedrock of, or groundswell of interest from people, and it's quite interesting that there are a lot of informal cooperatives out there, perhaps who do not have like a constitution. It's a group of neighbours working together on something, for example, or a group of friends setting up a bookshop, for example, and then taking it from there. What do you feel would help these people make that step into establishing themselves as cooperatives and being successful going forwards?
Well, I think you would say, well, I would say this anyway, but one of the things that will help them is cooperative development agencies. Having strong and well-financed cooperative development agencies that people can access to obtain skills, support, advice, assistance, that is a crucial element. It goes without saying for me that I just would not be here if I'd not had that kind of assistance. For somebody to believe that that naive young woman with great ideas could actually turn into a businesswoman. And that's what CDAs are so good at, cooperative development agencies are so good at, helping people to realise their ambition and to realise what they have inside of themselves. And one would expect that if you have a strong cooperative development movement, you would have a strong cooperative movement. And I think the two go hand in hand. Unfortunately, over the time that I have been in the cooperative movement, I've actually seen cooperative development agencies fall away because there is no overall support for them. The government does not provide finance, and local authorities cannot afford to provide finance even if they might wish to, because they're so strapped. And so I think if we're to really see a cooperative movement develop and become stronger in this country, they do need that underpinning support. It's not to say that people cannot and will not set up cooperatives by themselves. They do. People choose to cooperate and will set up cooperatives, even if there's not a cooperative development agency around. But they will do so better, more effectively, more easily and more efficiently if they're supported to do so. And so I think we need to see some political commitment to this, some financial commitment to be able to get to where we want to be.
So, what's been your most positive experience in a cooperative?
Well, my most positive experience in a cooperative, I would think, is working with the two women who set up Shepshed Carers Cooperative. which is a domiciliary home care cooperative providing support and assistance for people who are elderly, infirm or ill to enable them to remain in their own homes and live with dignity. And the business, which is now perhaps 100 strong, was started way back in about 1993 by two women, Pauline Graves and Sarah Sanders, as she was at that point, who had both been made redundant for the third time each, were fed up of it, knew they had lots of skills, saw an opening in a new market for domiciliary home care, which was a fairly innovative idea, and set out to do so. And I remember them saying to me, we'd like to do this, but we can't because we're just two thick working class women from Chester-Nash. We have no qualifications, no skills. And I set out to show them that they were anything except two thick working class women from Chester-Nash. And they set up an exceptional business. Chester Carers is an excellent business which provides services for so many people, people who require care, their families, and has knock-on effects in terms of employment, etc. So 10 years after Chester Carers began to trade, Case nominated the cooperative for an award, and they were shortlisted. So I travelled to London to the glitzy awards ceremony with Pauline and Sarah, and we waited in great anticipation for the nominations to be read out and the award to be given. And they were up for Social Enterprise of the Year, so the top prize really. And I had my fingers crossed, and the presenter read out the winner, and to my disappointment, it was not Chester Carers. So I was tremendously upset for them and disappointed, and I turned to Sarah and I said, I'm so sorry you haven't won. And she said, but we have won, Dorothy. And I said, how do you make that out? You're not the one up there on the stage with the celeb getting your picture taken and being handed a trophy. And she says, no, we have won, Dorothy. She said, we've been winners for years. We became winners the day that you started to believe in us. We became winners the day that you told us that we could do it. And we became winners the day that you invested in us and gave us your trust and faith to do what we do. So she says, we're already winners, Dorothy. We don't need a trophy. So I instantly burst into tears because I think it's easily one of the nicest things anybody's ever said to me. And to me, that story sums up what I feel about cooperatives really, and about the power to change. Here were two women who described themselves as two thick working class women because that's all they'd ever been told they were. They were actually brilliant, well not were, they are brilliant business people, and they set up a brilliant business which has now been running for the better part of 30 years. And the next year, Case nominated Chester Carers for that very same award, Social Enterprise of the Year. We went back down to London to another glitzy ceremony, and we waited again in anticipation whilst all the nominations were read out. And this time, Chester Carers did win